Ever since the Raptors won the 2019 NBA championship, there's been a distinct downward trend in talent on the roster, and perhaps the biggest reason for this is something you may not be noticing. Let's get into it. For more Raptors analysis and news coverage and videos just like this, as well as our live stream watch parties for every Raptors game, make sure you're subscribed to Amateur Hour Sports, helping me on my road to 16,000 subscribers. We're getting very close to that milestone. And if you enjoy this video along the way, make sure you have hit that like button. It makes a huge difference to the channel when you smash that like button, helping us end up on some more YouTube recommended pages. And I understand when it comes to winning a championship, especially for smaller market teams like the Raptors. And I say smaller market in the sense that, yes, it's a big market. Toronto's a big market. You have the whole country rooting for the Toronto Raptors. I say small market in the sense of attracting free agents to the team. The Raptors, even after that championship, still struggle to have that sort of effect in the open market to bring players into the team, especially players of significance, players of big note to the team. They still struggle to do that, which makes them maybe one of those more smaller market teams. So naturally, as the talent sort of dries up going for a championship, you're paying a lot of guys big contracts. Those players age out. Those players leave in free agency. These sort of things can happen as a result of winning a championship. All this is something that I'm keeping in mind over the course of this video, but there has been a downward trend in talent on the roster ever since that championship, or ever since maybe the year after the championship, where the Raptors, yes, they had a bit of a downward trend in talent, but they still had a wonderful season in 2019-20, where they lose in Game 7 to the Boston Celtics. They have not gotten back to that point since then in the second round of the playoffs. They haven't gotten back since that point, so there's been a bit of a downward trend in terms of talent on the roster. It's no secret with what we're seeing here, and it's starting to feel like that season where the Raptors finish as the 5th seed, win 48 games, go to 6 games in the first round of the playoffs against the 76ers. It's starting to feel like that was the blip, and that was the outlier season for the team, and we're starting to really see what it is now. This kind of middling team sitting in the middle of the Eastern Conference, a play-in caliber team. Like, this is the type of team that the play-in tournament was kind of designed for, to keep this team more relevant and more competitive throughout more of the season. That's just not an ideal position for an NBA franchise to be in, but how did we get into this position? Because even before the Raptors won a championship, when they were winning tons of games, they still weren't able to really attract any big name free agents. And if they ever did attract a big name free agent, well, it was DeMarre Carroll, who was absolutely horrific for the team. But in spite of that, they continued to win games. In spite of that bad contract, in spite of the buyout of DeMarre Carroll, they still managed to put together what would be the foundation for a championship level roster. So how were we able to do that then? And why are we not able to do that now? I think that the biggest thing that's going a little bit unnoticed about the team right now, in terms of why the talent has dried up a little bit, is the scouting. Think about those Raptors teams in, let's say, 2013 up until 2019 with the NBA championship. Maybe even go one more year to 2020. Think about, in that time frame, what the Raptors were starting to become very much known for. They were becoming known for, and the fans owned this, they were very much becoming known for the scouting, for finding the diamond in the rough sort of players, bringing them into the team when no other team was interested, when they were overlooked by so many other teams. The Raptors would bring that player in, and that player would find success on the court on a consistent basis and get himself into the rotation. So the Raptors didn't need to strike on the big name free agents. They didn't need to make the massive trade. They found consistently role player type guys who would play above their pay grade, above their normal level. And when the Raptors got that consistently, they started to produce wins consistently and were just churning out like 48 win seasons at the time. So what has changed so significantly now that they aren't able to do this as much anymore? Well, I think there's a number of factors that we can investigate as to why this is no longer the case. I think first and foremost, the scouting department just isn't what it used to be. We aren't scouting these sorts of players. Like, think about Miami Heat right now. They're known for finding these diamond in the rough guys. They're known for the development. They're known for bringing guys up through the G League. That was us at the time too. That was the Raptors at the time. It was Miami and Toronto right at the top of the pile for finding these sort of players and bring guys through the G League. Like, think about the caliber of players that have played in the G League for the Raptors. You talk about Pascal Siakam, a 27th overall pick. You can talk about Norman Powell, a 46th overall pick. You can talk about Fred VanVleet, undrafted. Chris Boucher, a G League MVP, undrafted. Like, Chris Boucher is probably the last time that we found a diamond in the rough, overlooked sort of player and molded them and developed them into a consistent rotation player for their team in the NBA. Like, this used to be a yearly theme for the Raptors to find a player like this, like who is going to break out this year. But now we are just no longer getting that. The last time we really found that sort of player, once again, it's feeling like it was Chris Boucher with that development project, where like in 2019, he was on the championship roster. Yes, had no significance towards the winning the championship, like he was on the roster 100%, but never did I expect for him to become like a mainstay in the Raptors rotation as he has done up until this point today. So scouting certainly is an area where the Raptors are no longer hitting those players. Within the draft, I think that draft picks have also dried up a little bit in terms of like they just don't use as many draft picks as they had been using at the time. They seem to want to trade away their draft picks. They kind of have that taste of a championship with Masai Ujiri in the front office. It feels like they have that taste of a championship, and they just so crave that taste again that they want to rush things. They want to make the big splash in terms of trades. They don't want to sit. They don't want to settle. That's the vibe I'm getting with the front office at the moment with the Raptors, because they keep on trading away these first-round picks unnecessarily for a team that everybody kind of understands is not close to winning an NBA championship. And for that reason, they don't have their first-round pick going into the 2024 draft, unless they do fall into the bottom 6 in the lottery, which I would say is very, very unlikely at this point. So scouting certainly is one area, and probably the biggest area where things are drying up. I think we can attribute that a lot to Masai Ujiri, because his scouting team was part of the reason why the Raptors could rise up so much and could find these sorts of players so often. But I think maybe an underrated part of it that needs to be discussed perhaps is the Kyle Lowry effect. Now, if you notice, Kyle Lowry is in the thumbnail. I'm not referencing like Kyle Lowry leaving. Like, obviously, that hampered the Raptors a little bit in terms of point guard play, in terms of leadership, in terms of veteran presence. But it was time for both parties to split. Kyle Lowry wanted to go more to a contender. Miami have proven to be that contender since he's gone there. He's putting up great figures this season, starting for the Miami Heat. Like, Kyle Lowry would have been a great player to have and would be a great player to have back for the Raptors, but it was time to split. Now, the manner in which it happened, probably should have traded him at the trade deadline when Tyrese Maxey was available from the 76ers. You don't make a great trade with Miami, as it turns out. All of these things, yes, they can come into play, but I'm more so stating about the Kyle Lowry effect on the team. Perhaps Kyle Lowry as that leadership figure and just the absolute boss on the court, just the floor general, knew how to get the best out of his players, knew how to find the mismatches for his teammates. Like, the Raptors were such a good clutch team with Kyle Lowry because his decision-making was so good. He would always give the ball to the right player to exploit their mismatch. And sometimes maybe Kyle Lowry had the mismatch and he'd take it on himself. Like, think about the heroics in Game 6 against the Boston Celtics in that 2020 playoff run, where without him, like, we don't even force Game 7. And my goodness, we almost even win that series against the Boston Celtics, despite Pascal Siakam playing so poorly and coming off a season where we lose Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green completely for nothing. Like, Kyle Lowry is such a significant part of that era for the Raptors, and I think it's a little bit underrated, his significance on developmental projects, his significance on maybe making the scouting team look really, really good, because he had such a consistency for getting the best out of his teammates that perhaps we don't have right now. Like, I think about that game against the Dallas Mavericks where the Raptors set the franchise record for a comeback in a game, a 30-plus point comeback. Like, think about the guys that were on the floor then. This is Chris Boucher before his breakout. This is Malcolm Miller, who's no longer in the league. This is Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, who's no longer in the league. Like, these guys were on the floor with Kyle Lowry for this insane run we went against the Dallas Mavericks. Like, that whole comeback was Kyle Lowry influencing the game. So I think that's just a one, like, shrunken down example, that one game. But I think that one game is a bit of the evidence showing that Kyle always knew how to get the best out of his teammates, get the best out of the other guys on the team. So overall, the game-changing shift for the Raptors has been the decline in the talent pipeline. The Raptors 905 have been a disaster this year. Yes, it's as a result of a lot of injuries as well, but they started 0-8 this season. They have struggled to find wins. They struggled last season as well. They've struggled mightily since Patrick Mutombo left the team. But still, that pipeline of talent was never quite coming into the Raptors as it was back in the early stage of the Raptors 905. With that D-League championship, with the success in the G League, the players coming up, as I mentioned earlier, that sort of pipeline of talent has diminished. And I think the biggest reason is scouting. Part of it's development as well, and you can make a case that Nick Nurse wasn't getting the most out of these developmental projects, but in the early phases he was getting more out of these lesser-known players, out of these overlooked players. So I think time will tell on this one. the effect Nick Nurse had on the lack thereof of development. Perhaps it was the Nick Nurse coaching staff, because right now the Raptors, like the entire staff of coaches, Darko all the way through the coaching staff on the bench, have been hired with development in mind. Like, go through all the resumes. Everybody has development in mind with this Raptors coaching staff. So if the talent still isn't quite showing up and the development is still not showing up, despite the fact that we've gotten rid of Nick Nurse, who looks like a great coach once again, and I mean, maybe every day I see the Raptors, it's proving how good Nick Nurse was last year for the Raptors as well. But we moved on from Nick Nurse. That was the right decision. We've brought in a development-minded head coach and a coaching staff. So time will tell the effect that Nick Nurse potentially had on development, but I would wager that it's very limited. The reality was there just wasn't a great crop of talent rising through the ranks or being selected by the Raptors at the time. Now, they hit the absolute grand slam home run with Scotty Barnes, and the Raptors really need to start focusing on getting the most out of him at this stage. Like, from what I'm seeing this season, it's time to really bank on Scotty Barnes' development and bank on building around him for the future. But other than that, there's just been a lot of misses by this team. And the talent pool, the talent pipeline, it has dried up. So how much of that's on Nurse? How much of that's on Masai? How much of that is on Kyle Lowry no longer being here? Time will tell on this, but all I know is that the game-changing shift here that's causing this decline for the Raptors is very much as a result of no longer having that pipeline of talent. And until we get that back, the Raptors will struggle to get back to the top of the NBA. But perhaps they can start to work on things, as Scotty Barnes is showing an ability to get the most out of his teammates, playing with the bench unit for so much of this season. You start to put shooters around him. You start to put a bit more talent around him. Who knows where this team can go? So what do you think of this whole situation? Do you agree with me on everything? Do you disagree with me? What's the biggest reason for the lack of development? Is it Lowry? Is it Masai? Is it Nurse? You give me your opinion in the comments down below. That's all from me for today. Thanks so much for watching. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more Raptors content like this, and I'll see you again very soon for another video.